Honestly, Grandma, I don't know how you expect anyone to eat this. My grandson Jeremy's words hung in the air of my sunny kitchen. His face twisted in disgust as he pushed away the plate of homemade lasagna I'd spent 3 hours preparing. Behind him, my daughter-in-law Melissa shifted uncomfortably, while my son David stared intently at his phone, pretending he hadn't heard. It was the monthly family dinner I'd been hosting for years, but lately, these gatherings had grown increasingly tense. The sauce is way too bland, the pasta's mushy, and seriously, who puts that much basil in anything? It's like eating a garden, Jeremy continued, his 16-year-old confidence unwavering as he reached for his water glass, dramatically washing away the taste. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I felt my cheeks burning as I stood frozen by the counter, wooden spoon still in hand. This wasn't just about dinner. This was about respect, about family, about the growing distance between us that seemed to widen with every passing month. I'd been cooking Italian food for over 50 years. I knew my way around a kitchen better than most people knew their own homes, but Jeremy wouldn't know that. He only knew me as his slightly old-fashioned grandmother with the outdated kitchen and the too tight hugs. Jeremy, Melissa finally interjected, her voice carrying that familiar strain of half-hearted discipline. That's no way to speak to your grandmother. What? I'm just being honest, Jeremy shrugged, already pulling out his phone. Besides, if Grandma really wants to know what good Italian food tastes like, she should try Bella Luna. Their lasagna is incredible. Bella Luna. The irony of his words might have made me laugh if they hadn't stung so badly. Instead, I simply nodded and turned back to the stove, pretending to adjust the heat on a pot that didn't need adjusting. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I've lost my touch. Mom, the food is fine, David finally spoke up, though he still hadn't taken a bite. Jeremy's just being a teenager. No, it's okay, I assured him, forcing a smile as I sat down at my own barely touched plate. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, even about lasagna. I watched Jeremy tap away at his phone, probably texting friends about how awful his evening was going, trapped at his grandmother's house eating inedible food. He'd been such a sweet child once, always eager to help me in the kitchen, flour, dusting his chubby cheeks as we rolled out dough for Christmas cookies or Sunday pizza. When had that little boy disappeared, replaced by this dismissive stranger who couldn't be bothered to show even basic courtesy? The dinner continued in uncomfortable fits and starts. David talked about his work at the investment firm, careful to avoid anything too complex that might bore his son. Melissa chimed in with updates about her yoga studio's expansion. Jeremy remained mostly silent, except to ask when we could have dessert, which he'd already verified was store-bought ice cream and therefore acceptable to his refined teenage palate. So, Jeremy, I attempted conversation again as I cleared the mostly full plates. How's school going? You must be thinking about college soon. It's fine, he replied without looking up from his phone. And yeah, I guess. Dad wants me to go. Business school. But I'm thinking about culinary arts. I nearly dropped the plates I was carrying. Culinary arts? You want to be a chef? This finally earned me direct eye contact, though accompanied by an eye roll. Yeah, Grandma. I actually care about food, you know. Good food. The emphasis on good was unmistakable, another little dig at my cooking. Jeremy, David warned, but I waved him off. No, it's wonderful, I said, genuinely meaning it despite the delivery. I didn't know you were interested in cooking professionally. Been thinking about it for a while. Jeremy shrugged, suddenly a little less confident. Chef Martelli at Bella Luna started an apprenticeship program for high school students. I applied last week. Ah, so that explained the sudden interest in cuisine, and perhaps the heightened criticism of mine. Chef Anthony Martelli was the public face of Bella Luna, the charismatic executive chef who had become something of a local celebrity with his cookbook and occasional morning show appearances. What Jeremy didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Anthony Martelli worked for me, not the other way around. "That's a competitive program," I said carefully. "Bella Luna has quite a reputation." "It's only the best Italian restaurant chain in the Northeast," Jeremy stated matter-of-factly. "Their marinara sauce is legendary. Chef Martelli says the recipe has been guarded for generations." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. That legendary marinara recipe had been created in this very kitchen, 47 years ago, when I was just 23 and desperate to save my parents' failing restaurant. The secret ingredient was a specific blend of herbs grown in small batches by a family farm outside Syracuse, a family I'd supported financially through 3 generations now. "Well, I hope you get the apprenticeship," I said sincerely. "It would be a wonderful opportunity." Jeremy actually seemed surprised by my encouragement, perhaps expecting me to be hurt by his obvious preference for Bella Luna's food over mine. "Thanks, Grandma," he mumbled, the first genuine moment between us all evening. As the night wrapped up, I hugged each of them goodbye at the door of my modest suburban home. Melissa promised to call more often. David reminded me about next month's dinner. Jeremy gave me the briefest of hugs, already mentally elsewhere. "Oh, Jeremy," I called as they were heading to their car. "If you do get that apprenticeship, remember that good food isn't just about fancy techniques or secret ingredients. It's about heart. It's about creating something that brings people together." He gave me a puzzled look, as if I'd started speaking a foreign language. "Sure, Grandma. Whatever you say." After they drove away, I stood in my doorway for a long moment, watching their taillights disappear down the quiet street. The neighborhood had changed so much since Richard and I had first bought this house 30 years ago. New families, new buildings, everything constantly in flux. But this house remained largely the same, a time capsule of memories both happy and painful. Inside, I cleaned up the dinner dishes slowly, scraping uneaten lasagna into the trash with a sigh. My phone rang just as I was drying the last pot. The caller ID showed Anthony Martelli. "Hello, Anthony," I answered, settling into my favorite armchair. "Mrs. Romano, I was just calling to check if we're still on for tomorrow's meeting about the Chicago expansion." His voice was respectful, energetic as always. "Yes, of course. And please, after 15 years, I think you can call me Sophia." He laughed. "Old habits. My mother would come back from the grave and twist my ear if I addressed you so informally. She still talks about how you gave our family a chance when no one else would." I smiled at the memory of hiring Anthony, a rough around the edges cook with spectacular talent but a problematic employment history. 3 restaurants had fired him for his temper before he came to work at the original Bella Luna. I saw something in him, though, not just his undeniable skill with food, but a passion that reminded me of myself at that age. "Speaking of giving chances," I said casually, "I understand you've started an apprenticeship program for high school students." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Yes, it's something I've wanted to do for years. Give back to the community, find raw talent early. The response has been overwhelming, nearly 50 applications already. I hesitated, weighing my next words carefully. My grandson applied. Jeremy Winters. Winters. Anthony paused, presumably thinking, "Ah, yes. Smart kid, very passionate in his essay. Mentioned eating at our Hartford location every chance he gets. I haven't made final selections yet, but he's definitely in the running." "I see," I said neutrally. "Anthony, I need to be clear about something. If my grandson earns a spot in your program, it should be on his own merit. Not because of his connection to me. In fact, he doesn't know about my connection to Bella Luna at all." There was a moment of silence on the line. He doesn't know you own the company? No, none of my family knows except my late husband. I've always kept my business and family lives separate. I didn't add that this separation had grown from necessity in the early days, when a female restaurant owner wasn't taken seriously, especially in Italian cuisine. Richard had often posed as the owner in meetings with vendors and banks, while I created the menus and ran the actual operations. Even after we expanded beyond that first struggling location, even after we incorporated and acquired other restaurants, I maintained my privacy. I understand, Anthony said, though his tone suggested he found it puzzling. I'll evaluate him just like any other applicant. Thank you. And Anthony? I'd appreciate your discretion on this matter. Of course, Mrs. Romano. Your secret is safe with me. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, thinking about Jeremy's dismissive attitude toward my cooking, about the wall that had grown between us, and about the complicated reasons I'd kept my business success hidden from my family all these years. When Richard and I first transformed my parents' small, struggling trattoria into Bella Luna, we were young and idealistic, working 18-hour days and pouring every penny back into the business. By the time our son David was born, we had 3 locations and were beginning to see real financial stability. But I had already established a pattern of separating my home life from my work life. The restaurant business was all-consuming, often messy, sometimes ruthless. I wanted to protect my son from that world, to give him a normal childhood without the pressure of a family legacy. So David grew up knowing I worked in restaurant management, but never understanding the full extent of my role or success. He showed no interest in the culinary world, instead gravitating toward finance and economics. I was secretly relieved. He would forge his own path, free from expectations. Perhaps I had been wrong to maintain the separation for so long. The modest house, the careful budget I appeared to keep, the simple lifestyle, all part of a carefully constructed image that had become increasingly difficult to maintain as Bella Luna grew into a regional powerhouse with 27 locations across 6 states. My net worth now exceeded 8 figures, a fact that would shock my family if they knew. The next morning, I drove to Bella Luna corporate headquarters, a converted textile mill in the heart of downtown. The brick building retained its industrial character outside, giving no indication that it housed the nerve center of a restaurant empire. My reserved parking space was marked only with SR, my own small concession to ego after decades of building this business. "Good morning, Mrs. Romano," my assistant Claire greeted me as I entered. "The Chicago property reports are on your desk, and Chef Martelli is already waiting in the conference room with the design team." "Thank you, Claire. Could you also pull Jeremy Winter's apprenticeship application for me? I'd like to review it after the meeting." Claire nodded efficiently, making a note. "Of course. And just a reminder that you have lunch with the Restaurant Critics Association at noon." The meeting about our Chicago expansion went smoothly. Anthony had excellent ideas for adapting our menu to incorporate some local Illinois flavors while maintaining our core identity. The design team presented renderings for the new location that perfectly captured the Bella Luna aesthetic: warm, inviting, authentically Italian without falling into cliché red checkered tablecloth territory. "Mrs. Romano," the head architect said, pointing to a detail on the blueprints, "we've incorporated the open kitchen concept you requested, with the wood-fired oven as the focal point. Diners will be able to watch the entire pizza-making process." I nodded approvingly. "Excellent. People eat with their eyes first. Letting them see the craftsmanship builds anticipation." After the meeting, I returned to my office to find Jeremy's application on my desk. I hesitated before opening the folder, feeling like I was invading his privacy somehow. But I needed to know what had drawn him to Bella Luna, what had sparked this culinary interest he'd never shared with me. His essay was surprisingly thoughtful and well-written. He described his first memory of eating at Bella Luna when he was 8 years old. how the experience had opened his eyes to what food could be. Not just sustenance, but art and connection. He wrote about watching the pizza makers through the pass-through window, fascinated by their confident movements and easy camaraderie. Most touchingly, he mentioned trying to recreate Bella Luna's dishes at home, experimenting in his parents' kitchen, never quite capturing the magic, but enjoying the process nonetheless. There was no mention of me or my cooking in the essay, which was both a relief and a small heartbreak. What would Jeremy think if he knew that the marinara sauce he so admired had been adapted from my grandmother's recipe? That the distinctive herb blend had been perfected in countless late-night sessions at my kitchen table decades ago? I closed the folder. Decision made. I would tell them. Not immediately, and not to influence the apprenticeship decision, but my family deserved to know the truth about my life's work. The separation between my personal and professional lives had served its purpose when David was young, but now it was creating an unnecessary distance between me and my grandson. A distance that might be bridged by sharing this part of myself. I'd kept hidden for so long. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. That evening, my phone rang just after 7 o'clock. "Mom?" David sounded unusually animated. "Sorry to call so late, but Jeremy just got some exciting news and wanted to tell you himself." Before I could respond, Jeremy's voice came on the line. "Grandma? I got the apprenticeship at Bella Luna. Chef Martelli called personally to tell me. I start next weekend." "Jeremy, that's wonderful news," I said, genuinely pleased despite knowing Anthony had likely made his decision hours ago during our post-meeting conversation. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Chef Martelli said my essay showed real passion for food. He wants me to shadow different stations in the kitchen, learn every aspect of the restaurant. "That's the right approach," I said, unable to keep my professional knowledge from seeping into the conversation. A good chef understands not just cooking, but how the entire restaurant functions as a system. "Yeah, exactly." Jeremy sounded surprised by my insight. "Anyway, Dad suggested we celebrate with dinner this weekend. Would you like to come with us? To Bella Luna, obviously." I caught my breath, mind racing. This invitation was perfect, a natural opportunity to reveal my connection to the restaurant. "I'd love to," I said carefully. "Which location were you thinking?" "The flagship downtown," Jeremy said. "Chef Martelli said he'd be there Saturday and could give us a tour of the kitchen." Of course he had. Anthony was nothing if not perceptive about what I might want. "Saturday sounds perfect. Shall I meet you there, or would you like to pick?" "Me up?" "We can pick you up at 6, David chimed in, having apparently been listening on another extension. "It'll be fun, Mom. When was the last time we took you out for a nice dinner?" I couldn't remember, which was telling in itself. "I'm looking forward to it," I said sincerely. After hanging up, I immediately called Anthony. "I believe you've arranged a little scenario for Saturday evening," I said when he answered. He laughed. Guilty as charged. "When your grandson mentioned wanting to celebrate with his family, I might have suggested the downtown location. Was that overstepping?" "No," I assured him. "It's actually perfect. I've decided it's time my family knew about my connection to Bella Luna." "About time, if you ask me," Anthony said with the familiar bluntness I'd always appreciated. "You've built something remarkable, Mrs. Romano. You should be able to share that with the people you love." "Yes, well, it's complicated," I sighed, "but I'm tired of the secrets, especially now that Jeremy is showing such interest in the culinary world." "I'll make sure everything is perfect on Saturday," Anthony promised. "And for what it's worth, your grandson's application really was impressive. His passion for food reminds me of someone else I know." I smiled at the comparison. "Just be gentle with him in the kitchen. Not everyone responds well to your more colorful teaching methods." Anthony's booming laugh filled the phone line. "Don't worry. I save the wooden spoon techniques for the professional cooks who should know better. The days until Saturday passed in a blur of preparations. I instructed the downtown staff to treat my family like any other guests upon arrival. No special recognition, no hints about my position. Anthony would give them the standard kitchen tour he offered to interested patrons, and only when the time felt right would I reveal the truth. I also spent considerable time in my home office, gathering photographs and mementos from Bella Luna's eye. History. Pictures of the original location's opening day, with my parents standing proudly beside Richard and me. The framed first dollar earned, news clippings from our expansion milestones, restaurant critic reviews that had turned the tide of our success. I carefully arranged these items in a leather portfolio, a visual timeline of my professional journey. Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear, a perfect early autumn night. I dressed with more care than usual, choosing a tailored burgundy blazer over a simple black dress, professional but not ostentatious. The single strand of pearls Richard had given me on our 20th anniversary completed the look. David, Melissa, and Jeremy arrived promptly at 6, all similarly dressed up for the occasion. Jeremy seemed particularly polished, his usual hoodie replaced by a button-down shirt and tie. "You look very handsome," I told him as I got into their car. He actually blushed slightly. "Thanks, Grandma. I wanted to look professional since I'll be meeting the staff I'll be working with." The drive downtown was filled with excited chatter, mostly from Jeremy, about the apprenticeship program and what he hoped to learn. David and Melissa contributed occasional comments, clearly pleased by their son's enthusiasm even if they didn't fully understand the culinary terminology he was using. As we pulled up to the flagship Bella Luna restaurant, I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach. The familiar facade with its subtle signage and warm exterior lighting was so much a part of me that it was strange to approach it as if I were just another customer. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Jeremy said, noticing my appreciative gaze. "Wait until you see inside, Grandma. It's like being transported to Italy." I nodded, smiling at his excitement. The interior had indeed been designed to evoke an Italian courtyard, with soaring ceilings, stone archways, and cleverly concealed lighting that created the impression of early evening no matter the actual time of day. The walls featured hand-painted murals depicting various Italian landscapes: the Tuscan countryside, the Amalfi Coast, the rolling hills of Umbria. I had personally selected each scene, working with the artists to capture the essence of places. Richard and I had visited during our 20th anniversary trip through Italy. The maitre d' greeted us warmly. "Welcome to Bella Luna. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Winters," David replied. "We're also scheduled for a kitchen tour with Chef Martelli. My son is starting the apprenticeship program next week." Recognition flickered in the maitre d's eyes. He clearly knew who I was, but he maintained his professional demeanor perfectly. "Of course, Mr. Winters. We're delighted to have you with us this evening. Chef Martelli mentioned your visit. Please, follow me to your table." He led us through the bustling main dining room toward a corner table beside one of the large windows overlooking the river. It was one of the best tables in the house, though not so obviously special that my family would suspect any unusual treatment. "Your server will be with you momentarily," the maitre d' said as we settled into our seats. "And Chef Martelli will come out to greet you once you've had a chance to enjoy some appetizers." Jeremy was practically vibrating with excitement, his eyes roaming over every detail of the restaurant. "Isn't this amazing, Grandma? The acoustics are perfect, busy but not too loud. And look at how the stations are positioned so the servers never cross paths. It's so well designed." I nodded, genuinely impressed by his observations. These were details most 16-year-olds, most adults for that matter, would never notice. "You have a good eye," I said. "Efficient design is crucial to a successful restaurant." Our server approached with a warm smile. "Good evening. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with some sparkling water for the table?" "That would be lovely," I replied, opening my menu despite knowing every item by heart. David and Melissa ordered cocktails while Jeremy requested the house-made Italian soda, another of my creations that had become a signature at all Bella Luna locations. And Mrs. Sophia caught herself just in time. And for you, ma'am, perhaps our signature Bella Luna sparkler. It's Prosecco with a touch of limoncello and fresh berries. Perfect, I said, grateful for her quick recovery. As Sophia departed, Jeremy leaned forward. Should we get a bunch of appetizers to share? The arancini here is incredible, and the calamari is like the best I've ever had. Whatever you recommend, Jeremy, I said, enjoying his enthusiasm. You're the expert here. This small acknowledgement of his expertise seemed to please him immensely. He proceeded to order a selection of starters with surprising confidence. When Sophia returned with our drinks, explaining each dish to me as if I were a first-time visitor, which officially I was. The arancini recipe is from Sicily, he informed me as the golden risotto balls arrived at our table. They add a little saffron to the rice, which gives it that amazing color and flavor. I nodded, not mentioning that I had personally adjusted that recipe 5 years ago when our previous saffron supplier retired, and we had to source from a new region. The slight increase in quantity had been necessary to maintain the flavor profile with the less potent Spanish variety we now used. The appetizers were indeed excellent, exactly as they should be, though I noted a slight inconsistency in the calamari breading that I would mention to Anthony later. Jeremy watched expectantly as I took my first bites. Well, what do you think, Grandma? Better than last night's dinner, right? He asked, immediately regretting his words as Melissa shot him a warning look. Jeremy, that's unkind, she admonished. No, it's all right, I said, setting down my fork. And yes, Jeremy, the food is excellent. Different from my home cooking. Of course. Restaurant food and home cooking serve different purposes after all. He looked confused. What do you mean? Good food is good food. I considered how to explain. Restaurant food is designed to impress, to create an experience. Home cooking is about nourishment and connection. Both can be extraordinary in their own way. David chuckled. Mom has always been philosophical about food. Remember how she used to say that a meal cooked with love could never truly be bad? Because it's true, I said simply. Though technical skill certainly helps, I added with a smile. Just then, Anthony appeared at our table, resplendent in his chef's whites, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed for public appearances. Good evening. You must be the Winters family. I'm Anthony Martelli. David and Melissa introduced themselves, clearly impressed to be meeting the famous chef they'd seen on morning shows and in cookbook photos. Jeremy stood up to shake Anthony's hand, practically glowing with excitement. It's an honor to meet you, Chef Martelli, he said. I've been coming to Bella Luna for years. Your food is what inspired me to start cooking. Anthony smiled warmly. That's the highest compliment a chef can receive. And please call me Anthony. We're going to be working together after all. He turned to me, extending his hand as if we were strangers. And you must be Jeremy's grandmother. He mentioned you in his application essay. Said his first memory of cooking was making cookies with you when he was little. I accepted his handshake, playing along. Sophia Romano, it's a pleasure to meet you, Chef Martelli. My grandson speaks very highly of your restaurants. Something flickered in Jeremy's expression at the formal introduction, a momentary confusion that quickly passed. I wondered if he was surprised by my composure in meeting a local celebrity, or perhaps puzzled by Anthony's reference to an essay detail he didn't remember including. How about that kitchen tour before your main courses arrive? Anthony suggested. I can show Jeremy where he'll be working next weekend. We all agreed enthusiastically, following Anthony through the bustling restaurant toward the gleaming open kitchen. As we walked, he pointed out various design elements and operational details, many of which I had personally specified during the renovation 5 years ago. The flow of this space was carefully designed, Anthony explained, echoing Jeremy's earlier observation. From the moment ingredients enter the back door to when finished plates reach the customer, everything moves in the most efficient path possible. The kitchen itself was a marvel of modern culinary design combined with traditional elements. State-of-the-art equipment stood alongside handcrafted wooden work tables and the massive wood-fired oven that was the heart of every Bella Luna restaurant. Staff members nodded respectfully as we passed, a few giving me quick glances of recognition before returning to their tasks. Anthony led us through each station: garde-manger for cold preparations, pasta, grill, pizza, and finally pastry, explaining the function of each area and introducing key personnel. Jeremy absorbed every word, asking insightful questions about workflow and techniques. I noticed how the kitchen staff responded to his genuine interest, several of them offering additional information or small demonstrations when Anthony paused. "And this," Anthony said, stopping before a framed document hanging near his office door, "is the original Bella Luna menu from when the restaurant first opened in 1976. Only 12 items compared to our current 48, but the foundations were all there." I held my breath as my family leaned in to examine this piece of history, my history. The simple typewritten menu showed the humble beginnings: spaghetti with meatballs, lasagna, chicken parmesan, a few pizzas, and the cannoli that had been my grandmother's recipe. "Wow," Jeremy said quietly. "So simple, but I bet it was amazing." "Indeed it was," Anthony confirmed. The founders had an extraordinary vision for authentic Italian cuisine, when most Americans still thought Italian food meant overcooked pasta drowning in sauce. He glanced at me, eyebrows raised slightly in silent question. I gave a small nod. The moment was approaching. "Who were the founders?" Jeremy asked, exactly as I'd anticipated. "Well," Anthony said carefully, "Bella Luna began as a small family trattoria called Romano's. When the founder's daughter and her husband took over, they renamed it and began the expansion that eventually created what you see today." David frowned slightly. "Romano's? That's a coincidence." "Not really," I said quietly, feeling my heart rate increase. "It was my parents' restaurant." 3 heads turned to me in perfect unison, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. "What are you talking about, Mom?" David asked. "Your parents ran a small Italian restaurant, sure, but it wasn't—" He stopped, pieces beginning to connect in his mind. Anthony stepped back, giving us space while remaining present for support. The kitchen staff continued their work, though I noticed a few watching the scene unfold with barely concealed interest. "My parents opened Romano's in 1950, I explained, my voice steady despite my nerves. "When your father and I took over in 1976, we reimagined it as Bella Luna. The restaurant you know today grew from that single location." Jeremy's mouth had fallen open. You own Bella Luna?" "Yes," I said simply. "I do." "But," he sputtered, looking around as if seeing the kitchen with new eyes, "but you live in that little house, and you drive that old car, and you never said anything." "I kept my business life separate from our family life," I explained. "It began as a practical decision when your father was young, and then it just became a habit, perhaps not the wisest one." David looked stunned. "Mom, are you telling me you're not just some retired restaurant manager? That you're actually the founder and owner of a multi-state restaurant chain?" "Yes," I confirmed, reaching for his hand across the stainless steel prep table. "I'm sorry I wasn't more forthcoming. At first, I wanted to protect you from the pressures of a family business. Later, I worried you might feel I'd been deceiving you all these years." "Which you had been," he pointed out, though his tone held more amazement than anger. Melissa looked between us, processing. "Sophia, does this mean... financially, are you..." I smiled wryly. Comfortable? Yes, very. Jeremy seemed to be having the hardest time adjusting to this revelation. But you let me criticize. Your cooking. You let me go on and on about how amazing Bella Luna's food is, like I was teaching you something. I enjoyed your enthusiasm, I said gently. And criticism helps us improve. Though I admit, hearing you call my lasagna disgusting, while praising the restaurant version, which uses my recipe by the way, was a bit ironic. Chef Anthony couldn't suppress a chuckle. The marinara recipe your grandson is so fond of? Your grandmother created it, Jeremy. I've been trying to convince her to let me modify it for years. She won't budge. Jeremy looked utterly mortified. Now, his earlier excitement replaced by horror as he recalled his dismissive comments about my cooking. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I was such a jerk. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I assured him. How could you? I chose not to share this part of my life with you. That's on me, not you. David was still struggling with the implications. But Mom, why maintain the pretense? Why live so modestly when you could afford much more? I considered this. Question carefully. The house has everything I need. It has memories of your father, of you growing up. As for the rest, I shrugged. I put most of the profits back into the business or into our employee programs. The scholarship fund, the healthcare benefits, the retirement matching. Those things mattered more to me than a mansion or a luxury car. Anthony nodded approvingly. Your grandmother has built more than just restaurants, Jeremy. She's created a community. Half our staff have been with Bella Luna for over a decade, unheard of in this industry. Many have sent their children to college through her scholarship program. Jeremy's expression shifted from embarrassment to something like awe. So when I got the apprenticeship, you earned it, I assured him quickly. Anthony evaluated your application on its merits. I only found out you'd applied after you'd submitted the paperwork. Though I would have happily shown favoritism if she'd asked, Anthony added with a wink. Your grandmother gave me a chance when no one else would. I owe my career to her. David shook his head, still processing. I can't believe you've kept this secret for decades. Does anyone in the family know? Your father knew everything, of course, I said. He was my partner in building Bella Luna. After he passed, it just seemed easier to maintain the separation between my personal and professional lives. Anthony cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this conversation at your table. Your main courses should be ready by now, and I've taken the liberty of preparing some special dishes for the occasion. We returned to our table in a daze, the dynamic between us fundamentally altered by my revelation. Jeremy kept staring at me as if seeing a stranger, while David repeatedly shook his head in disbelief. Melissa seemed the least affected, quickly adapting to this new information, with practical questions about the business structure and operations. Our main courses arrived, presented with flourish by Anthony himself. He had indeed prepared special dishes, updated versions of recipes from the original Romano's menu, including the lasagna that Jeremy had criticized just the night before. I present to you Sophia Romano's classic lasagna, prepared exactly according to her specifications, Anthony announced, placing the steaming dish before Jeremy. The recipe that launched a culinary empire. Jeremy looked from the lasagna to me, then back to the dish. Hesitantly, he took a bite. His eyes widened. This tastes just like… He stopped, realization dawning. It's exactly like what you made last night, isn't it? I nodded, unable to suppress a small smile. The restaurant version has a few presentation differences, but the recipe is identical. He put down his fork, expression stricken. I really am sorry, Grandma. I was such an idiot. You had no way of knowing, I assured him, and teenage taste buds can be particular. David was sampling his own dish, a classic chicken piccata that had been on the menu since opening day. "Mom, this is extraordinary. I mean, I've eaten your cooking my whole life, but somehow this feels different." "Context matters in how we experience food," I explained. "The same dish served in a restaurant, with proper lighting and atmosphere, often tastes better than when eaten at a family table under fluorescent lights with everyday stresses in the background." Jeremy pondered this. "So last night, when I said your lasagna was terrible, you were comparing a home-cooked meal eaten in a regular kitchen to a carefully plated restaurant dish served in a designed atmosphere," I finished for him. The dinner continued with a new energy, the awkwardness gradually giving way to genuine curiosity. As we ate, I found myself sharing stories about Bella Luna's beginnings that I'd kept locked away for decades. Tales of 18-hour workdays and near bankruptcies, of the first restaurant critic who discovered us, and of the countless mistakes and triumphs that had shaped the business along the way. David listened with rapt attention, occasionally shaking his head in wonder, while Melissa asked surprisingly astute questions about the financial structuring of the company. But it was Jeremy who seemed most transformed by the revelation, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by an intense focus on every word I spoke. "Wait," he interrupted as I described our early expansion challenges. "So when you were adding the second location in Hartford, you were only 30? And you already had Dad?" I nodded, taking a sip of my wine. "Your father was 5 when we opened Hartford. I'd bring him to the construction site in the mornings before dropping him at kindergarten. He'd wear this tiny, hard hat the contractors gave him." David laughed. "I have absolutely no memory of this." "You were more interested in the bulldozers than the restaurant plans," I told him. "I have photos somewhere, you sitting on the contractor's lap, pretending to operate the equipment." "But how did you manage it all?" Jeremy pressed. "Running a restaurant, expanding to a new city, raising Dad?" The question was perceptive, touching on struggles I rarely discussed. "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "There were many nights I came home after you were asleep, David. Many mornings I left before you woke up. Your father handled so much of the day-to-day parenting during those years." I paused, memories washing over me. It's one of my few regrets, missing those moments I can never get back. David reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Mom, I never felt neglected. Dad always made it clear how hard you were working for our family." "Still," I said, "it's why I kept the world separate as you grew older. I didn't want the business to consume your childhood the way it sometimes consumed mine." Jeremy seemed to be processing this, his expression thoughtful. "So that's why you never talked about being, like, this successful restaurant mogul? You didn't want Dad to feel pressure to join the family business?" "Partly," I acknowledged. "And partly because once you establish a certain perception of yourself, it becomes difficult to change it without seeming dishonest. The longer I maintained the separation, the harder it became to reveal the truth." "That's why you've been living in that same house all these years? Driving that old Volvo? When you could afford—" Melissa stopped herself, perhaps realizing how the question might sound. I smiled. "When I could afford much more? Yes. But that house has everything I need. After your grandfather passed away, I considered moving, but there are too many memories there. Too much of him in every room." A comfortable silence fell over the table as we all took bites of our meals. Anthony had outdone himself, each dish a perfect representation of Bella Luna's signature style. Authentic Italian cuisine elevated with subtle contemporary touches. I made mental notes about the new seasonal risotto, appreciating the delicate balance of butternut squash and sage with the unexpected addition of crispy pancetta. "Grandma," Jeremy said eventually, his tone more serious than I'd heard from him. "In years, will you teach me? I mean, not just the apprenticeship here, but your recipes, your techniques?" The stuff that doesn't make it into the official training? The request caught me by surprise, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. I'd like nothing more, Jeremy. You know, David interjected, this explains so much. All those little comments over the years about restaurant operations or food, cost management that seemed oddly specific, coming from someone I thought was just a retired restaurant manager. I laughed. I tried to keep my world separate, but sometimes the knowledge bleeds through. Speaking of knowledge, Jeremy said, sitting up straighter, can I ask how the marinara sauce is actually made? Chef Martelli said it's your recipe, and I've been trying to reverse engineer it for months. The secret, I leaned in conspirationally, is in the balance of acidity. Most home cooks don't add enough acid to tomato sauces. A splash of good red wine vinegar and the zest of half a lemon brightens everything. That and patience. You can't rush a proper marinara. Jeremy's eyes widened. Lemon zest? I never would have guessed. My grandmother's innovation, I explained. She was cooking in Sicily during lean times. Lemons were plentiful when meat and other flavorings weren't. The remainder of dinner flowed with an ease I hadn't experienced with my family in years. We ordered dessert, the signature tiramisu and cannoli that had been on the menu since opening day, and continued talking about Bella Luna's history and future. I found myself increasingly aware of the irony. For decades, I'd feared that revealing my success would create distance between me and my family. Yet, it was the secrecy itself that had fostered the growing disconnect I'd felt in recent years. As we finished our coffee, Anthony returned to the table. I hope everything was to your satisfaction, he said, the formality of his tone belied by the twinkle in his eye. It was wonderful, as always, I assured him, though I noticed the new risotto might benefit from a touch more acid to balance the richness. He nodded thoughtfully. I was thinking the same thing. Perhaps a light drizzle of aged balsamic? Or a few drops of lemon oil in the finishing butter, I suggested. Jeremy watched this exchange with fascination. You guys just add workshop recipes like this? On the fly? Anthony laughed. Your grandmother has the best palate in the business. When she makes a suggestion, I listen. Speaking of listening, I said, I'd like to host a proper family dinner next weekend. At my house. No secrets, no pretenses. I think it's time I showed you more of who I really am. David looked surprised but pleased. That sounds great, Mom. Can I help cook? Jeremy asked eagerly. I'd be disappointed if you didn't, I told him. We can start with that marinara sauce you've been trying to crack. As we prepared to leave, Anthony handed Jeremy a package wrapped in Bella Luna's signature gold paper. Your official apprentice. Uniform. We start at 9 next Saturday morning. Don't be late. Jeremy accepted it reverently. I won't let you down, Chef. Or you, Grandma. The ride home was animated with continued questions and discussions, the mood lighter than any family conversation I could remember in recent years. When they dropped me off at my modest 3-bedroom colonial, I stood in the driveway watching their taillights disappear down the street, feeling a peculiar mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The weight of decades of compartmentalization had lifted, replaced by the nervous anticipation of what this new openness might bring. Inside, I moved through my familiar rooms with new eyes, seeing the space as my family might now view it. The home of a successful businesswoman who chose simplicity over ostentation, the living room with its comfortable but hardly luxurious furniture, the dining room where family gatherings had grown increasingly strained over the years, the kitchen where I'd prepared countless meals, including last night's derided lasagna. I paused at the closed door to my home office, the one room I'd always kept private from family visitors. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked it and stepped inside. Unlike the rest of the house with its intentionally modest furnishings, this space reflected my professional accomplishments. The walls displayed framed awards and recognitions, James Beard nominations, industry accolades, feature articles from major food publications. Shelves held leather-bound financial reports documenting Bella Luna's growth over decades. My large desk faced windows overlooking the garden Richard had planted 30 years ago, which I still maintained exactly as he had designed it. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of fully integrating my separated lives. I would show Jeremy and David this room. I would share the financial realities of the business I'd built. I would stop pretending to be less than I was out of some misguided fear that my success might alienate the people I loved most. The next morning, I woke early as usual, my mind already organizing the tasks ahead. After my ritual first cup of coffee on the back porch, I called Claire to inform her I'd be working from home. Then I dialed Anthony's direct line. "How do you think it went?" I asked without preamble when he answered. "Honestly, better than I expected," he replied. "Your family seemed shocked but not upset. Your grandson looked like he'd seen both a ghost and a superhero at the same time." I laughed at the accurate description. "He's coming by later today. Wants to learn the marinara recipe before his first official day at the restaurant." "Planning to give away all our secrets, are you?" Anthony teased. "Family recipes belong in the family," I replied simply. "Besides, that boy has a natural palate. Did you see how quickly he identified the flavor profiles in the seasonal menu?" "I did. He's got potential, Sophia. Real potential." "I know," I said softly. "I saw it in him years ago, before he started hiding his interest in cooking. I think he feared his father would disapprove. David always pushed for business school, practical careers." "Like father, like son," Anthony noted. "You did the same to David, didn't you? Steered him away from the restaurant business?" I sighed, recognizing the truth in his observation. "Not intentionally, but yes, I probably did. Another well-intentioned mistake to add to my list." "Don't be too hard on yourself. You did what you thought was best at the time. That's all. Any of us can do." After hanging up, I spent the morning preparing for Jeremy's visit. I gathered the ingredients for a proper marinara demonstration: San Marzano tomatoes imported directly from Italy, fresh basil from my garden, the special blend of herbs from our Syracuse farm supplier. I set out my professional-grade knives, usually kept in their custom case in my office. The kitchen already looked different somehow, as if acknowledging my true identity had physically altered the space. Jeremy arrived precisely at noon, his earlier casualness replaced by a punctuality that made me smile. He'd dressed in dark jeans and a clean button-down shirt, apprentice casual, as Anthony would call it. "Hi, Grandma," he said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Is it weird that I know now?" "A little," I admitted, gesturing him inside. "But good weird. Like finally being able to take off uncomfortable shoes after a long day." He laughed at the analogy. "I still can't believe it. You're like famous in the restaurant world. I've been reading about you online all morning." "Oh dear," I said, genuinely alarmed. I've tried to keep my public profile rather low. "Not that easy these days," Jeremy noted. "There's a whole Wikipedia page about Bella Luna, with a section about you as the founder, and some interviews from food magazines, and a speech you gave at some restaurant industry conference 3 years ago." I groaned. "The digital age makes privacy quite challenging." "Why did you want privacy, though? Most people would be bragging about building a restaurant empire from scratch." I considered his question as I led him into the kitchen. "It wasn't about modesty, if that's what you're thinking. Initially, it was practical. Female restaurant owners weren't taken seriously in the 1970s. Your grandfather often had to be the public face for vendor negotiations and bank loans, even though we were equal partners in reality." Jeremy frowned. "That's messed up." "It was the reality of the time," I said, beginning to assemble ingredients on the counter. Later, once success came, I found I preferred focusing on the work itself rather than public recognition. The separation also protected your father from unwanted attention or expectations. And then it just became a habit? He guessed. Exactly. A habit that may have outlived its usefulness. I handed him an apron, one of my professional Bella Luna chef's aprons with the restaurant's gold crescent moon logo. Now, are you ready to learn the famous marinara? His face lit up as he tied on the apron. Absolutely. For the next 2 hours, I guided Jeremy through the process of creating a proper marinara sauce from scratch. I showed him how to select and crush tomatoes, the importance of frying garlic in olive oil just until fragrant but not browned, the precise moment to add herbs, and most importantly, how to taste and adjust throughout the cooking process. He proved to be an attentive student, asking insightful questions and taking notes in a small moleskin notebook he'd brought specifically for the occasion. The key, I explained as we reached the final simmering stage, is patience. A good marinara needs at least an hour of gentle heat to fully develop its flavors. Most home cooks rush this part. Is that why you were simmering your sauce all afternoon yesterday before dinner? Jeremy asked. I nodded. The sauce you called bland and overherbed had been cooking for 3 hours before you arrived. He winced. I really am sorry about that, Grandma. It's forgotten, I assured him, though I admit I was confused. The recipe is identical to what we serve at the restaurant. Jeremy considered this, stirring the sauce thoughtfully. I think maybe I wanted to find fault with it, to justify preferring restaurant food over home cooking. His self-awareness surprised me. That's quite an insight. He shrugged, suddenly looking younger. I've been thinking about it all night, about why I was such a jerk about your cooking. I think part of it was just being a stupid teenager, trying to seem sophisticated. But part of it was also... Was what? I prompted gently when he trailed off. I think I was mad that you never seemed interested in my love for food, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. I've been obsessed with cooking for years, trying recipes, watching videos, eating at different restaurants whenever I could convince Mom and Dad to take me. But when I'd talk about it with you, you'd just nod and change the subject. His words landed like a physical blow. Had I really been so guarded that I'd discouraged my own grandson's passion? A passion we clearly shared? Oh, Jeremy, I said softly. I never meant to seem disinterested. I think I was overcorrecting, so afraid of revealing my connection to the culinary world that I avoided in-depth conversations about food altogether. Well, it worked, he said with a small smile. I never suspected a thing. Even when I started, going to Bella Luna all the time, even when I memorized the menu and tried to recreate the dishes at home, I never made the connection. I've been thinking about that, I said. About all the moments I could have, should have, shared this part of myself with you and your father. All the teaching opportunities I missed because I was so committed to keeping my world separate. We can make up for lost time though, right? Jeremy's hopeful expression warmed my heart. Absolutely, I promised. Starting today. We let the sauce continue its gentle simmer while I showed Jeremy around parts of the house he'd never really explored before. I saved my office for last, watching his expression transform from curiosity to astonishment as he took in the tangible evidence of my professional life. Whoa, he breathed, examining a framed magazine cover featuring Bella Luna's flagship location. 2015 Restaurant Group of the Year? Grandma, that's huge. It was a good year, I acknowledged modestly. We'd just completed our sustainability initiative, transitioning all locations to renewable energy and implementing the farm-to-table program. And these are all... He gestured to a wall of framed certificates. Various recognitions, industry awards mostly, a few charitable acknowledgements. I pointed to a particularly ornate document. That one I'm especially proud of. the Italian government's recognition for cultural contributions. Your grandfather and I received it during our last trip to Italy together. Jeremy moved slowly around the room, examining each item with care. He paused at a shelf holding leather-bound volumes. What are these? Financial reports, one for each year of Bella Luna's operation. I pulled out the most recent. This one shows our current position. 27 locations across 6 states, just over 900 employees, and annual revenue approaching $70 million. His eyes widened at the figures. And you own all of this? No investors or partners? Your grandfather and I retained majority ownership from the beginning. We did take on some minority investors during the early expansion phase, but we bought them out by 1995. Now the company is held in a family trust, with provisions for continued growth and employee profit sharing. I replaced the report carefully. Eventually, this will all belong to your father, and someday to you, if you're interested. If I'm interested? Jeremy repeated incredulously. Of course I'm interested. This is incredible. His enthusiasm made me smile. Well, there's no rush. First, let's see how you like the restaurant business. It's not all glamorous menu planning and creative cooking. There's inventory management, staff scheduling, vendor negotiations, health department inspections. I want to learn all of it, he declared firmly. Everything you know. The conviction in his voice reminded me powerfully of myself at a similar age, determined to absorb every aspect of the restaurant business to build something lasting and meaningful. Perhaps the separation I'd maintained for so long had been unnecessary after all. Perhaps I'd underestimated my family's capacity to accommodate the fullness of who I was. A kitchen timer chimed from downstairs. The sauce, Jeremy said, immediately, heading for the door. His instincts were good. Even a minute too long on the heat could affect the delicate balance of flavors. Back in the kitchen, he carefully removed the pot from the burner while I gathered small tasting dishes. We sat at the breakfast nook, evaluating the marinara with the seriousness of professional chefs. The acidity is perfect, Jeremy noted, swirling the sauce in his spoon to check its consistency. And I can taste the herb blend clearly without it overwhelming the tomatoes. Your heat control was excellent, I praised. Notice how the olive oil has emulsified properly with the tomato juices? That creates the silky texture that distinguishes a professional sauce. He beamed at the compliment. It tastes exactly like the restaurant version. That's because it is the restaurant version, I reminded him. Same recipe, same techniques. The difference between home cooking and restaurant cooking isn't the ingredients or methods. It's the context and perception. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. I get that now. When I said your lasagna was disgusting, I was comparing it to a restaurant experience where everything, the lighting, the ambiance, the presentation, is designed to enhance the food. It wasn't fair. Perhaps not, I agreed, but it led us here to this moment of honesty. Sometimes criticism, even when it stings, opens doors to greater understanding. We continued tasting and discussing the sauce, then moved on to planning the family dinner for the following weekend. Jeremy suggested an ambitious multi-course menu showcasing Bella Luna classics, alongside some of my personal recipes that had never made it to the restaurant menu. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to cooking with him in a way I hadn't anticipated. Before you go, I said as our planning session wound down, I have something for you. I retrieved a package from my office, a leather-bound notebook embossed with his name. This is a chef's journal. I've kept one since I was younger than you are now. Every recipe, every experiment, every failure and success, it all goes in here. Jeremy accepted it reverently. Thank you, Grandma. There's one more thing, I added, hesitating briefly before continuing. I've been thinking about the apprenticeship program at Bella Luna. It's a wonderful opportunity, but it's also rather general, designed to give students a broad overview of restaurant operations. Right, he nodded. Chef Martelli said I'd rotate through different stations. Which is valuable, I assured him. But I was thinking we might supplement that with some more specialized training. Private lessons, if you will, focusing on the aspects of culinary arts that most interest you. His eyes lit up. You'd do that? Teach me yourself? If you're willing to spend your Sunday afternoons with your grandmother, yes. Are you kidding? That would be amazing. His enthusiasm was almost palpable. Wait until the other apprentices find out I'm getting personal training from the founder herself. I smiled at his excitement. You can start by learning this, I said, retrieving a well-worn notebook from a kitchen drawer. My original recipe journal, starting from when I first took over my parents' restaurant. Some of these dishes never made it to the Bella Luna menu, but they're an important part of our family's culinary heritage. Jeremy took the notebook with visible reverence. Can I look through it now? Of course, I encouraged. But be warned, my handwriting was quite terrible in those early days, and there are sauce stains on many pages. He carefully opened the journal, turning pages slowly, examining the handwritten recipes, margin notes, and occasional sketches of plating designs. This is incredible, he murmured. It's like a time capsule. In many ways, it is, I agreed. Your grandfather used to tease me about that journal, said I treated it like a ship's log, recording every culinary journey and discovery. Speaking of Grandpa, Jeremy said, looking up, was he involved in the cooking too, or just the business side? The question brought a rush of fond memories. Richard was a wonderful cook in his own right, though he focused primarily on the business operations. He developed our wine program from scratch. That was his passion. But he could make a risotto that would bring tears to your eyes. I smiled at the recollection. He's the one who insisted on the wood-fired ovens in every location, even when consultants said they were too expensive and complicated to maintain. He sounds amazing, Jeremy said softly. He was, I agreed. He would have been so proud to see you taking an interest in the family business. He always believed it should stay in the family, even when I worried about putting that expectation on your father. Do you think Dad feels bad? Jeremy asked. That he didn't go into the restaurant business? I considered the question carefully. I don't think so. Your father found his own path, his own successes. That's all any parent really wants for their child. That they find work that fulfills them, whatever that might be. Jeremy nodded, returning his attention to the recipe journal. He stopped at a page headed, Sophia's Experimental Tiramisu. Is this the one that's on the menu now? Close, I said, peering over his shoulder. That was version 3. The current recipe is version 5, with slightly less rum and a different mascarpone to cream ratio, but the essence is the same. Could we make this sometime? He asked eagerly. Compare the different versions? I'd love that, I told him. Sincerely. Perhaps for next weekend's family dinner? His face lit up with excitement. Definitely. We could do a tiramisu tasting flight. Different versions side by side. Dad would love that. As Jeremy continued exploring the journal, I watched him with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride in the passionate young man before me. Regret for the years of connection we might have shared if I'd been more open about my life's work. But regret was a poor use of energy, especially when the present offered such rich opportunities for new beginnings. Jeremy, I said as he carefully turned another page, I want you to know something. No matter what path you choose, whether it's culinary arts, business, or something else entirely, what matters most is that you approach it with integrity and passion. Success isn't measured by restaurants opened or awards won. It's measured by lives touched, by work that brings you joy, by creating something meaningful in whatever field you choose. He looked up from the journal, his expression surprisingly mature. Is that why you kept living in this house? Driving that old car? Because the money and stuff didn't matter to you? Partly, I acknowledged. The trappings of success never interested me much. But it was also about balance. I'd seen too many colleagues lose themselves in their work, sacrificing family and personal well-being for professional achievements. I wanted success, certainly, but not at any cost. Jeremy considered this. But wasn't it hard? Keeping these parts of yourself separate? Always pretending to be less successful than you are? His perception surprised me. Yes, I admitted. Harder than I realized, I think. There were many times I wanted to share a professional triumph with your father or you, but couldn't without revealing the whole truth. Many times I bit my tongue when you talked about restaurants or cooking techniques, wanting to contribute but afraid of giving myself away. That sounds lonely, he said quietly. The simple observation struck me with unexpected force. It was, I said softly. I didn't fully realize how lonely until last night, sitting at that table with you all, finally able to share my whole self. Jeremy closed the recipe journal carefully. Well, no more secrets now, right? No more pretending to be less awesome than you actually are. I laughed at his phrasing. No more secrets, I promised, though I make no guarantees about the awesome part. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted our conversation. Through the kitchen window, I saw David's sedan pulling up. That's Dad, Jeremy said, checking his watch. He's early. Let's show him the marinara we made, I suggested. And perhaps give him a tour of my office as well? I think it's time he knew the full extent of his inheritance. Jeremy nodded enthusiastically. He's going to freak out when he sees all those awards. Probably, I agreed, moving toward the door. But in a good way, I hope. As I went to greet my son, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The burden of maintaining separate identities had been heavier than I'd realized, the cost to my relationships higher than I'd been willing to acknowledge. But now, with that barrier removed, I could finally be my complete self with the people who mattered most. Not just Sophia, the grandmother, or Sophia, the retired restaurant manager, but Sophia Romano, the woman who had built something enduring and meaningful from a small family trattoria, who had navigated a male-dominated industry on her own terms, who had created not just restaurants but a legacy. Whatever came next, whether Jeremy pursued a culinary career, whether David took a more active interest in the family business, whether I finally upgraded from my modest house to something reflecting my actual means, we would face it together, with honesty and openness. The recipe for family harmony, it seemed, wasn't so different from the recipe for a perfect marinara sauce. Quality ingredients, careful attention, patience, and above all, the willingness to adjust as needed until the balance was just right. David's expression as he entered my kitchen was one of lingering amazement, as if he still couldn't quite believe what he'd learned the previous night. He stood awkwardly in the doorway for a moment, briefcase in hand, looking at me with new eyes. Hi, Mom. Sorry to interrupt your cooking lesson. I finished my client meetings early and thought I'd pick up Jeremy on my way home. You're not interrupting at all, I assured him, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel. In fact, your timing is perfect. We've just finished making the marinara sauce, and I was about to show Jeremy my office. You should join us. Your office? David's eyebrows rose. The room you've always kept locked? The one Dad used to joke contained state secrets? I laughed. Not quite state secrets, but certainly family ones. It's time you saw it too. I gestured for him to follow us down the hallway to the room at the back of the house that had been off limits throughout his childhood and adult life. When I opened the door, David's reaction mirrored Jeremy's earlier astonishment. He stepped inside slowly, taking in the awards, the financial reports, the framed magazines and news clippings that documented Bella Luna's rise from a single struggling restaurant to a regional powerhouse. Mom, he breathed, moving toward the wall of accolades. This is incredible. I had no idea. He stopped before a large framed photograph I'd taken down last night to show Jeremy, the official opening of the first Bella Luna with my parents, Richard and me cutting the ribbon. I remember this day, vaguely. I must have been, 5? Almost 6, I confirmed. You were standing just outside the frame, holding a miniature pair of scissors and insisting you should get to cut a ribbon too. David laughed. I don't remember that part. He moved to examine a more recent photograph, Richard and me receiving an award from the National Restaurant Association 10 years ago. Dad looks so proud here. He was, I said softly. That recognition meant a lot to him. It validated all the risks we'd taken over the years. David continued around the room, his expression shifting between wonder and confusion as he absorbed the scope of the business I'd built. When he reached the leather-bound financial reports, he paused. May I? I nodded, and he selected the most recent volume, opening it with the careful precision of someone accustomed to financial documents. As he flipped through the pages, his professional training evident in how quickly he assessed the key figures, his eyes widened. Mom, these numbers, this is significant, yes, I acknowledged. The company has grown considerably in recent years, particularly since we expanded into the Boston market. He looked up from the report, his expression difficult to read. All this time, he said quietly. All these years, I thought you were getting by on a modest pension and careful, saving. I even worried sometimes about whether you had enough set aside for long-term care if you needed it. I felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry for the deception, David. It started with good intentions, wanting to give you a normal childhood, free from the pressures of the family business. Then it just continued, long past the point where it made sense. He closed the report carefully. I'm not angry, just processing. Finding out your 70-year-old mother is actually a secret millionaire restaurant mogul is a lot to take in. Jeremy, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, piped up. Multi-millionaire, actually. I looked up estimates of what restaurant chains this size are worth. David shot his son an exasperated look. Not helping, Jeremy. I smiled at their interaction. Your son's research is quite accurate. The current valuation of Bella Luna Restaurants, Inc. is approximately $83 million. David sat down heavily in my desk chair. 83 million. And you're still clipping coupons for grocery stores and refusing to replace that ancient water heater. Habits of a lifetime, I said with a small shrug. And there's nothing wrong with being frugal, regardless of one's bank balance. Frugal is one thing, Mom. Unnecessary self-deprivation is another. He glanced around the office again. Does this mean you're planning to finally retire? Truly retire, I mean, not just pretend to be retired while secretly running a restaurant empire from your home office. I laughed at his phrasing. I've been gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations for several years now. Anthony, Chef Martelli, handles most of the culinary leadership, and I have an excellent executive team managing the business aspects. But full retirement? I shook my head. I'm not sure I'm built for that. But you could do anything now, David pressed. Travel the world, buy a villa in Italy, upgrade this house at the very least. I could, I acknowledged, and perhaps I will make some changes now that I don't need to maintain the facade. But material upgrades have never been my priority. I moved to stand beside him at the desk, resting my hand on his shoulder. What I really want now is time. Time with you, with Melissa. Time to teach Jeremy everything I know about food and business, if that's still his interest. It absolutely is, Jeremy asserted from where he'd been examining a display case containing my collection of antique cooking implements. David looked up at me, his expression softening. I still can't believe you kept all this from us for so long. Weren't there moments when you wanted to just tell us? Countless times, I admitted. When you were struggling to finance your first home, when Jeremy was born, when you were deciding whether to leave your firm and start your own practice. So many times I wanted to say, don't worry about the money, I can help. But I'd maintained the separation for so long, and I worried that suddenly revealing my financial status would seem manipulative or controlling. David nodded slowly. I can understand that, I guess, but still, knowing we could have had your expertise all these years, your business knowledge. I mean, Mom, I'm a financial advisor. I help people manage wealth and businesses for a living, and all this time, my own mother was a case study in successful entrepreneurship right under my nose. Perhaps we can make up for lost time there as well, I suggested. Bella Luna will need succession planning in the coming years. The current corporate structure is sound, but there are always improvements to be made. A gleam of interest appeared in David's eyes. Succession planning? Are you thinking of transitioning ownership? Eventually, yes. The company is currently held in a family trust, with provisions for management continuation if something were to happen to me. But I've always intended for Bella Luna to remain in the family, even if family members choose not to be actively involved in operations. David's expression grew thoughtful. I'd like to see those trust documents, if you're willing, just to understand the structure better. Of course, I agreed. They're in the safe behind that landscape painting. Your father insisted on the hidden safe, said it made him feel like a character in a movie. Jeremy looked delighted at this revelation. You have a hidden wall safe? That's so cool, Grandma. I smiled at his enthusiasm as I moved the painting aside and began entering the combination. Your grandfather had a flair for the dramatic in certain ways. The safe swung open, revealing neatly organized folders, jewelry boxes, and a small stack of cash. I extracted a thick legal folder and handed it to David. The trust documents updated last year. You'll find everything clearly outlined. As David began reviewing the paperwork with professional interest, Jeremy moved closer to the open safe, peering curiously at its contents. What are those? He asked, pointing to a stack of small notebooks. My travel journals, I explained. Your grandfather and I tried to visit Italy every few years to research regional cuisines and find inspiration for the restaurants. I documented every meal, every conversation with local chefs, every market and vineyard we visited. Jeremy's eyes lit up. Can I see them? Of course, I said, touched by his interest. I removed the journals and handed them to him. The blue one from 1992 has particularly detailed notes on traditional Sicilian cooking techniques. We spent a month in a small coastal village, learning from families who had preserved recipes for generations. While Jeremy settled into a corner armchair with the journals and David continued reviewing the trust documents at my desk, I found myself standing in the middle of my office, overcome by a powerful sense of rightness. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to compartmentalize or censor myself with my family. The relief was profound, like finally setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten the strain. Mom, David said eventually, looking up from the papers with a professional seriousness I recognized from his work demeanor. This is remarkably comprehensive, but there are some aspects of the succession planning that could be optimized from a tax perspective. And the provisions for intellectual property, recipes, techniques, brand elements, those could be structured more advantageously. I smiled at his immediate shift into advisor mode. I was hoping you'd say that. Would you be willing to review the entire structure and suggest improvements? I'd compensate you at your normal consulting rate, of course. He looked mildly offended. Mom, I'm not going to charge you for helping with family business. Professional work deserves professional compensation, I countered. A principle I've lived by for 50 years in the restaurant business. Never devalue expertise even, especially when it comes from family. David seemed about to argue further, but instead shook his head with a bemused smile. We can discuss terms later. But yes, I'd be honored to help restructure the succession plan. Excellent. I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying, the uncertainty of Bella Luna's future beyond my stewardship. Now, are you both hungry? That marinara sauce Jeremy and I made would pair perfectly with some fresh pasta. Actually, Jeremy interjected, looking up from the travel journals, I had an idea. Since Dad's here too, what if we do a proper tasting? Like, professional style, the way you would at the restaurant when developing new dishes. The suggestion delighted me. A wonderful idea. I have all the necessary supplies in the butler's pantry. David raised an eyebrow. The butler's pantry? Mom, this house doesn't have a butler's pantry. I smiled mysteriously. Are you sure about that? I led them from my office into the dining room, where I pressed on what appeared to be a seamless section of wainscoting. A previously invisible door popped open, revealing a small but immaculately equipped service kitchen. No way, Jeremy breathed. A secret room? This house is full of surprises. Not secret, just discreet, I corrected, entering the space and switching on the lights to reveal professional-grade equipment tucked into the compact area. This is where I prepare and plate when I host dinner parties. It allows me to serve restaurant-quality presentations without running back and forth to the main kitchen. David looked stunned. I've been coming to this house my entire life and never knew this existed. You never asked to help serve dinner parties, I pointed out mildly, retrieving small tasting plates and professional plating tools from a eye roar. With Jeremy's enthusiastic assistance, I assembled an impromptu tasting menu featuring the marinara sauce we'd made earlier, along with several other preparations I kept on hand for recipe testing. David watched in fascination as I guided Jeremy through the proper techniques for plating and presentation, demonstrating how to create the perfect sauce swirl, the importance of negative space on the plate, and the strategic placement of herbs for both flavor and visual appeal. The first bite is taken with the eyes, I explained as Jeremy carefully positioned a basil leaf. Even the most delicious dish will disappoint if its presentation doesn't create anticipation. This is so different from how you normally serve food at family dinners, David observed. The casserole dishes, the family-style serving. I had no idea you could plate like a Michelin star chef. Different occasions call for different approaches, I explained. Family-style service creates a sense of abundance and community. This type of precise plating is about focusing attention on each individual element of the dish, allowing for more analytical tasting. We carried our carefully composed plates to the dining room table, where I instructed them on proper tasting, technique, observing the appearance, inhaling the aroma, taking small bites with focus and intention. It was a revelation watching my son and grandson experience food this way, seeing their expressions shift from initial awkwardness to genuine engagement with the process. The complexity is amazing, David said after thoughtfully tasting the marinara. There are layers of flavor I never noticed before, even though I've eaten your tomato sauce my entire life. Mindful eating makes a tremendous difference, I explained. Most of us consume food while distracted, watching television, scrolling, through phones, thinking about work. When you give food your full attention, you experience it completely differently. Is this how you taste everything at the restaurants? Jeremy asked. For menu development, yes. We have formal tasting sessions with the executive chefs from all locations. Each dish is evaluated for flavor balance, texture, visual appeal, and consistency with the Bella Luna brand identity. Brand identity? David repeated, sounding impressed. You really do think of everything from both the culinary and business perspectives. I've had to, I said simply. A restaurant is both an artistic endeavor and a commercial enterprise. Neglect either aspect, and the whole venture fails. The tasting continued with animated discussion about flavor profiles, cooking techniques, and the business reasoning behind various menu decisions. I found myself sharing stories I'd never told them, about disastrous early experiments that led to unexpected breakthroughs, about the time a power outage forced us to cook an entire service on camping stoves, about the celebrity who offered to buy the original Bella Luna location for 3 times its value because he loved the tiramisu so much. "You've lived such an incredible life, Mom," David said as we finished the impromptu tasting menu. "I wish I'd known these stories years ago." "Me too," I admitted. Keeping my world separate meant missing countless opportunities for connection. It's one of my few regrets. "Well, we know now," Jeremy said pragmatically. "And we have plenty of time to catch up." His optimism made me smile. "Indeed we do. Starting with the family dinner next weekend. I think it's time I cooked for you properly. No more hiding my skills or pretending to be less knowledgeable than I am." "Can we invite Mom?" David asked. "She still can't quite believe all this. Kept saying she always thought you were just being modest about your cooking abilities." "Of course," I agreed. "And perhaps we should include Anthony as well. He's practically family after 15 years as my executive chef. It would give Jeremy a chance to connect with him before the apprenticeship begins." "That would be awesome," Jeremy said enthusiastically. "I have so many questions for him about the apprenticeship program and what to expect." As we continued planning the upcoming dinner, I noticed David's expression grow thoughtful. "Something on your mind?" I asked. He hesitated before responding. "I was just thinking about Dad, about how he kept this secret with you all these years. It must have been difficult for him, too." I nodded, feeling the familiar pang that accompanied thoughts of Richard. It was, especially in the early years when we were still establishing the business. He believed in maintaining the separation, for your sake, but there were times he advocated for more transparency, particularly as you got older and became interested in finance and business. "Really?" David looked surprised. He never gave any indication. "Your father was exceptional at compartmentalizing," I explained. "It's a necessary skill in the restaurant business, where you might be dealing with a staff crisis, a vendor dispute, and a health inspection, all while maintaining a calm, welcoming presence for guests." "I wish he could see this," David said softly. "The 3 of us, finally sharing the full story, planning a family dinner where you can truly be yourself." "He'd love it," I agreed, feeling both the ache of Richard's absence and the warmth of knowing how much he would have approved of this moment. "He always said the truth would come out eventually, that you couldn't contain passion forever." "Well, he was right," Jeremy observed. "All it took was me being a jerk about your lasagna to unravel decades of secrecy." We all laughed at the absurdity of it, the tension of the day dissolving into comfortable family banter. As I looked at my son and grandson across the dining table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The revelation that might have created distance had instead brought us closer, opening doors to deeper understanding and connection. The rest of the afternoon passed in continued conversation and planning. David reviewed more of the business documents, occasionally asking insightful questions about corporate structure and growth strategy. Jeremy alternated between exploring my collection of culinary books and practicing knife skills in the kitchen under my guidance. The house felt more alive than it had in years, filled with purpose and possibility. As evening approached, David glanced at his watch reluctantly. "We should probably head home. Melissa will be wondering where we are." "Call her," I suggested impulsively. "Invite her to join us for dinner. I'd like to cook for all of you properly, without pretense or holding back." David looked surprised but pleased. "Are you sure? It's already getting late." "Absolutely. It's time I stopped compartmentalizing my life and embraced being fully myself with the people I love most." While David called Melissa, Jeremy helped me inventory the refrigerator and pantry. "What are you thinking of making, Grandma?" Ida asked eagerly. "Something simple but executed perfectly," I decided. Veal saltimbocca with a sage brown butter sauce, roasted seasonal vegetables, and perhaps a lemon panna cotta for dessert. Jeremy's eyes widened. That's your idea of simple? I smiled. When you've been cooking professionally for 50 years, your definition of simple shifts somewhat. Besides, the saltimbocca cooks in minutes once it's properly prepared. Can I help? He asked, his enthusiasm palpable. I'm counting on it, I assured him. Consider this your first unofficial apprenticeship lesson. For the next hour, I guided Jeremy through the precise preparation of each dish, explaining techniques and sharing shortcuts I'd developed over decades in professional kitchens. His natural aptitude was evident in how quickly he grasped concepts, his hands increasingly confident as we worked side by side. David, never much of a cook himself, watched with evident pride as his son absorbed my teachings. When Melissa arrived, her initial awkwardness at the transformed family dynamic quickly gave way to genuine interest as David gave her a tour of my office and explained what we'd discovered throughout the day. By the time we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was relaxed and celebratory, a family finally free from the constraints of long-held secrets. I have to ask, Melissa said, as we enjoyed the saltimbocca that Jeremy had helped prepare. Why now? After all these years of keeping Bella Luna separate from family life, what changed? I considered her question carefully, aware that my answer mattered not just to Melissa, but to all of them. Several things converged, I said finally. Jeremy's interest in culinary arts created a natural bridge between my worlds. My own recognition that at 70, I need to think seriously about Bella Luna's future beyond my stewardship. And perhaps most importantly, the growing awareness that maintaining the separation was creating distance rather than protecting relationships. I'm just grateful the truth finally came out, David said, raising his wine glass. To know more, secrets, and to the extraordinary woman who's been hiding in plain sight all these years. To Grandma, Jeremy added, lifting his water glass with equal solemnity, for building something amazing and now being willing to share it with us. Melissa completed the toast. To family, past, present, and future. As we clinked glasses, I felt Richard's absence keenly, wishing he could witness this moment of connection and truth. Yet there was comfort in knowing how much he would have approved, how he would have reveled in finally sharing our full story with our son and grandson. The following week passed in a blur of activity. News of my connection to Bella Luna spread quickly through our extended family and social circle, leading to a flurry of surprised phone calls and visits from friends who had known me for years, without understanding the full scope of my professional life. Rather than the judgment or resentment I had feared, I was met primarily with admiration and good-natured teasing about my secret identity. Meanwhile, Jeremy began his official apprenticeship at the downtown Bella Luna, returning each evening full of stories and questions. His enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me of my own early days in the restaurant business when everything seemed full of possibility and challenge. David, true to his word, dove into reviewing Bella Luna's corporate structure and succession planning, bringing fresh perspective to considerations I'd been pondering for years. By the time Saturday arrived, the day of our planned family dinner, I felt more integrated and authentic than I had in decades. The house had been subtly transformed as well, with previously hidden items now displayed proudly. Photographs of restaurant openings alongside family pictures in the living room, my collection of international cookbooks arranged prominently in the den, awards and recognitions tastefully incorporated throughout the home rather than sequestered in my private office. For the dinner itself, I chose to prepare a multi-course tasting menu, showcasing both Bella Luna classics and personal recipes that had never appeared on the restaurant menu. Each dish would tell part of my story, from my parents' traditional Sicilian influences to modern innovations I'd developed in recent years. The dining room table was set with the fine linens and china I typically reserved for special occasions, accented with fresh flowers from my garden and candles in the antique silver holders Richard had given me on our 25th anniversary. Anthony arrived first, bearing a bottle of exceptional Italian wine and a folder of notes for Jeremy regarding his upcoming apprenticeship rotation. He moved through my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who had worked alongside me for years, automatically helping with final preparations while sharing updates on the restaurant's operations. "The Chicago location construction is on schedule," he reported while expertly slicing prosciutto for the antipasto course. "The head chef position has 3 strong internal candidates, just as you predicted, and the summer menu rollout has increased. Dinner covers by 12% across all locations." "Excellent news," I replied, adjusting the temperature under a delicate saffron broth. "Though I'm more interested in tonight in quality than quantity. How are the guest satisfaction scores?" He grinned, knowing my priorities well. "Up 5 points since the new table service protocols you designed. Turns out your idea about the timing of check delivery was spot on." "Of course it was," I said with mock imperiousness. 50 years in this business teaches you a thing or two about customer psychology." We continued working in comfortable tandem, exchanging observations about restaurant operations with the shorthand that comes from long professional partnership. When Jeremy entered the kitchen, his eyes widened at the sight of the elaborate preparations underway. "Whoa," he breathed, taking in the multiple sauces simmering, the precisely arranged platters, the intricate garnishes being prepared. "This is like a restaurant kitchen." "It is a restaurant kitchen tonight," I told him with a smile. "Come, put on an apron. We have work to do before the guests arrive." "But I thought we were the guests," he said, looking confused even as he automatically reached for an apron. "Tonight is special," I explained. "A proper chef's table experience in my home. Anthony and I will be preparing and serving a tasting menu for you, David and Melissa, along with a few other special guests who should be arriving shortly." "Other guests?" Jeremy looked both excited and nervous. "Just a few people who are important to Bella Luna's story," I said, deliberately mysterious. "Now help Anthony with the antipasto plating while I finish the saffron arancini." By the time David and Melissa arrived 30 minutes later, the kitchen had transformed into a well-orchestrated professional operation, with Jeremy fully integrated into the workflow under Anthony's guidance. I watched with pride as my grandson handled each task with increasing confidence, his movements becoming more efficient with each repetition. The doorbell rang again, just as David and Melissa were being seated in the dining room with welcome aperitifs. I nodded to Jeremy. "Would you get that, please? It's the rest of our dinner guests." He returned moments later, his expression a mixture of shock and awe, accompanying an elegant elderly couple I hadn't seen in person for several months. "Grandma," he said with unusual formality, "Mr. and Mrs. Bertolini are here." I smiled warmly at the distinguished couple. Marco Bertolini had been Bella Luna's first investor back in 1978, when Richard and I were struggling to finance our initial expansion. Now in his 80s, he remained on the company's advisory board, his business acumen as sharp as ever. His wife Elena, a formidable chef in her own right, had been my mentor and friend for over 40 years. "Marco, Elena," I embraced them both warmly. "Thank you for coming. It means the world to have you here tonight." "We wouldn't miss it," Elena declared, her Italian accent still pronounced despite decades in America. "Finally, you introduce your familia to your impero." She gestured expansively, the Italian word for empire sounding particularly grand in her rich voice. Marco smiled, patting my hand affectionately. "Sophia has been threatening to do this for years," I told her. "Family secrets grow heavier with time. Better to share the burden, no?" "You were right, as usual," I acknowledged. "Come, let me introduce you properly to my son and daughter-in-law. You met David years ago, but he was too young to remember." The introductions in the dining room were warm and animated, with Marco charming Melissa immediately, and Elena engaging David in a discussion of Italian economic trends that showcased her business intelligence beneath her grandmotherly exterior. Jeremy watched the interactions with fascination, clearly trying to piece together how these elegant strangers fit into the Bella Luna story. Mr. Bertolini was our first investor, I explained to him as we returned to the kitchen to prepare the first course. When your grandfather and I wanted to open a second location, no bank would lend to us. Marco believed in our vision when no one else would. And Mrs. Bertolini? Jeremy asked. Elena was already a celebrated chef when I was just starting out, I told him. She took me under her wing, introduced me to suppliers, taught me techniques. That would have taken years to learn on my own. Everything I know about Italian cooking began with her guidance. Jeremy's eyes widened. So they're like, your restaurant family. Exactly, I said, pleased by his understanding. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who believes in you, who supports your dreams, who shares your passion. With everyone settled in the dining room, Anthony and I began serving the first course, a delicate seafood crudo that paid homage to Elena's coastal Italian roots. As each subsequent course emerged from the kitchen, I shared its significance. In my culinary journey, the saffron arancini that had been the first Bella Luna signature appetizer, the handmade pasta with wild mushrooms that had won our first major restaurant review, the veal dish that Richard had insisted we keep on the eye. Menu even when food costs made it barely profitable. Between courses, Marco and Elena shared stories from Bella Luna's early days, painting a picture of the young, determined couple Richard and I had been, working impossible hours, taking enormous risks, and gradually building something extraordinary. David listened with undisguised fascination, hearing for the first time how his parents had navigated the challenges of entrepreneurship while raising a young family. Your mother would bring you to investor meetings in a little bassinet, Marco recalled, gesturing toward David. So professional in her presentation, but there you were, sleeping beside her financial projections. We had no choice, I explained. Childcare was expensive, and every penny went back into the business. Richard would take the morning shift, with you while I prepped for lunch service, then we'd trade. Was it worth it? Melissa asked quietly. The sacrifices, the long hours away from family? The question hung in the air for a moment, its weight palpable. I considered my answer carefully, aware that my response would shape how they all understood the choices I'd made. Yes and no, I said finally. Building Bella Luna has been profoundly fulfilling, creating something enduring, providing livelihoods for hundreds of people, preserving and evolving culinary traditions. These things have immense value. But there were costs, too. Moments with David I can never reclaim. Strain on my marriage during the most difficult years. The necessity of compartmentalizing my life in ways that sometimes felt artificial. I looked around the table at the faces of those I loved most. If I could do it again, I would still build Bella Luna, but I might not have kept it separate from my family life for so long. That division, which began as a practical necessity, eventually became a habit that served no one well. Elena nodded sagely. This is the wisdom that comes only with time, no? We make choices, we create our path, and then one day we look back and see what we might have done differently. But we also see what we did right, Marco added, raising his wine glass. And Sophia, you did so much right. Bella Luna stands as testimony to your vision and perseverance. The meal continued with conversation flowing as freely as the wine, weaving together the personal and professional threads of my life in a way I'd never before experienced. When Jeremy and Anthony emerged from the kitchen with the dessert course, a modern reinterpretation of my grandmother's cannoli recipe, I felt a circle completing itself. 3 generations of my family united in understanding the full story of our shared legacy. As I looked around the table at these beloved faces illuminated by candlelight, David absorbing the business insights Marco was sharing, Melissa deep in conversation with Elena about sustainable restaurant practices, Jeremy attentively observing Anthony's precise plating technique. I felt a profound sense of integration. The artificial boundaries I'd maintained for decades had finally dissolved, allowing me to be fully present as both the restaurant founder and the matriarch of this family. The secret I'd guarded for so long, that I was not just a grandmother, with a modest home and outdated kitchen, but the creator of a culinary institution, had not diminished me in their eyes as I'd feared. Instead, it had revealed dimensions of myself I'd kept hidden, allowing for deeper understanding and connection than I'd thought possible. What had begun with Jeremy's dismissive comment about my lasagna had culminated in this moment of family, unity, and revelation. The path forward was clear now. No more separation, no more compartmentalization, just the authentic integration of all aspects of my life and legacy. Together, we would write the next chapter of both our family story and the Bella Luna narrative, intertwined as they always should have been. 6 months after the Revelation dinner, I stood in the bustling kitchen of Bella Luna's flagship location, watching with undisguised pride as Jeremy confidently directed the preparation of his signature dish, a modern interpretation of traditional Sicilian arancini that had earned a permanent place on our seasonal menu. His apprenticeship had evolved into a part-time position, his natural talent impressing even the most seasoned members of our culinary team. "A touch more salt in the risotto base," I suggested, tasting a small sample he'd prepared. "Remember, the filling will draw some of the seasoning away." Jeremy nodded, making the adjustment without hesitation. At 17, he carried himself with a confidence that reminded me powerfully of Richard in our early restaurant days. Focused, passionate, unafraid to take creative risks within the bounds of culinary tradition. "How's that?" he asked several minutes later, offering me another taste. "Perfect," I confirmed. "The balance of acidity and richness is exactly right." He beamed at the praise, then turned to address the line cooks assisting with the evening's special tasting event. "Remember, each arancini needs to be exactly 45 grams before breading, and the internal temperature should hit 165 degrees. Precisely. We want absolute consistency tonight." I stepped back, allowing him to manage the final preparations without interference. Tonight was significant. Jeremy's official debut as a featured chef at Bella Luna's Spring Showcase, where he would present his dish alongside creations from our executive chefs. More importantly, food critics from 3 major publications would be in attendance, including the notoriously demanding James Peterson, whose review could make or break a restaurant's reputation. "Nervous?" Anthony asked, appearing beside me, as I observed Jeremy's careful direction of his team. "Not for myself," I admitted, "but for him. Yes. He's worked so hard for this opportunity." Anthony smiled. "He reminds me of you. That same meticulous attention to detail, the same instinct for flavor balance. He'll be fine." "I know," I said, though maternal concern, or grandmaternal in this case, couldn't be entirely suppressed. "Is David here yet?" "Arrived 10 minutes ago with Melissa. They're at the chef's table with the Bertolinis." He checked his watch. "Critics should be arriving in about 20 minutes. Everything's on schedule." I nodded, taking comfort in the well-orchestrated rhythm of the kitchen, a symphony of preparation I'd conducted myself for decades before gradually passing the baton to Anthony, and now, in a small but meaningful way, to Jeremy. The month since our family revelation had been transformative for all of us, barriers and pretenses falling away to reveal deeper connections than I'd thought possible. David had thrown himself into understanding Bella Luna's business operations. With characteristic thoroughness, his financial expertise proving invaluable as we refined the company's succession planning and expansion strategy. He still maintained his independent advisory practice, but had accepted a position on Bella Luna's board of directors, bringing professional distance and personal investment into perfect balance. Melissa, to everyone's surprise, including her own, had discovered a passion for the hospitality aspects of the restaurant business. Her background in customer experience design translated beautifully to enhancing Bella Luna's service standards, and she now consulted part-time on staff training across all locations. As for me, I'd finally found the courage to integrate my worlds completely. The modest house I'd maintained for appearance's sake had been sold, and I'd moved into a comfortable penthouse above the downtown restaurant, a space Richard and I had designed years ago, but I'd never occupied full-time. My new home reflected both my professional accomplishments and personal tastes, with a state-of-the-art kitchen that served as both creative workshop and gathering place for family dinners. Most meaningfully, I'd established the Richard Romano Culinary Scholarship Fund, providing education and mentorship opportunities for promising young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation had already welcomed its first cohort of 10 students, with Jeremy serving as a peer mentor despite being only slightly older than many of the participants. "Grandma," Jeremy's voice pulled me from my reflections. "We're ready for final plating approval." I moved to the pass-through where he had arranged a sample of each dish in his 5-course offering. The presentation was exquisite, technically, precise yet bearing the distinctive creative touches that marked it as uniquely his. "Beautiful work," I said sincerely. "Your grandfather would be so proud." A shadow of emotion crossed his face at the mention of Richard, whom he'd barely known, but whose legacy he now carried forward in unexpected ways. "Do you think he would have liked the saffron aioli? It's a pretty big departure from tradition." "He would have loved it," I assured him. "Richard always said tradition gave us roots, but innovation gave us wings. You've honored both beautifully here." Jeremy straightened his chef's coat, a customized version of the standard Bella Luna uniform, with his name embroidered beneath the restaurant's gold crescent moon logo. "I'm ready. Let's do this." The evening unfolded with the polished precision that had become Bella Luna's hallmark over decades. From my discreet position at the edge of the dining room, I watched Jeremy present each course to the assembled critics and VIP guests, his initial nervousness giving way to confident enthusiasm as he explained the inspirations and techniques behind his menu. David and Melissa beamed with undisguised pride from their table, while Marco and Elena Bertolini nodded appreciatively at each expertly executed dish. When the final dessert course had been served, a deconstructed cannoli that paid homage to both tradition and modernity, Jeremy emerged from the kitchen to a round of spontaneous applause. Even James Peterson, notorious for his stoic demeanor during tastings, offered a rare nod of approval. "Ladies and gentlemen," Anthony announced, stepping forward as the meal concluded, "tonight we've witnessed the debut of an extraordinary young talent. However, there's another story being celebrated this evening, one of family legacy and culinary passion spanning 3 generations." He gestured toward me, and I reluctantly moved to join him and Jeremy at the center of the dining room. Many of you know Sophia Romano as the founder of Bella Luna, but what you may not know is that the remarkable young chef whose food you've enjoyed tonight is her grandson, Jeremy Winters. Tonight marks not just his debut, but the public acknowledgement of a culinary lineage that will carry Bella Luna into its next chapter. Another round of applause rippled through the room, and I found myself unexpectedly moved by the moment. This public unification of my personal and professional identities, this open acknowledgement of family legacy. Jeremy leaned close to whisper in my ear, "Better than calling your lasagna disgusting, huh?" I laughed, the tension of the evening dissolving in shared humor. "Marginally better, yes." Later, after the critics had departed and the regular dinner service had concluded, our family gathered in my private dining room above the restaurant. Anthony had joined us, along with the Bertolinis and several longtime Bella Luna employees who had become extended family over the years. "A toast," David proposed, raising his glass, "to Jeremy for an extraordinary culinary debut. The reviews will be glowing. Even Peterson couldn't find fault with a single dish." To Jeremy, everyone echoed, glasses lifted in celebration. And to Mom, David continued, his expression softening, who created not just a restaurant but a legacy that continues to evolve and thrive. Thank you for finally sharing your full self with us. To Sophia, came the response, accompanied by warm smiles and nods of agreement. I gazed around the table at these beloved faces, family by blood and family by choice, feeling a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a teenager's dismissive comment about my cooking had led us here, to this moment of intergenerational connection and shared purpose. I have a small announcement, I said as the toast concluded. As some of you already know, I've been working on a cookbook, not a standard restaurant cookbook, but something more personal. A collection of recipes and stories spanning 3 generations of our family, from my parents' original trattoria to Jeremy's innovative creations. Really? Jeremy looked surprised and delighted. You never mentioned that. Some habits of privacy die hard, I admitted with a smile. But I'd like to invite both of you, David and Jeremy, to contribute to it. David with his memories of growing up alongside Bella Luna, and Jeremy with his unique perspective as the 3rd generation carrying our culinary traditions forward. I'd be honored, David said immediately. Me too, Jeremy added. Though it's still wild to think that my annoying comment about your lasagna somehow led to all of this. Life rarely follows a recipe exactly as written, I observed. The most interesting outcomes often come from unexpected ingredients. Elena Bertolini raised her glass once more. This is wisdom, Sophia. In cooking as in life, no? Indeed, I agreed. And speaking of unexpected ingredients, I have one more. Surprise. I nodded to Anthony, who disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a familiar deep dish covered in foil. You didn't, Jeremy said, recognition dawning on his face. I did, I confirmed as Anthony set the dish on the table and removed the foil to reveal a perfect lasagna, identical to the one Jeremy had dismissed 6 months earlier. Same recipe, same technique, I explained as Anthony began serving portions to everyone. But this time, enjoyed in the right context, with the right company, and the right appreciation for what it represents. Jeremy took the first ceremonial bite, closing his eyes as he savored it. When he opened them, they shimmered with emotion. It's perfect, Grandma. It always was. The dish didn't change, I said softly. Only our understanding of it. As everyone enjoyed the lasagna, exclaiming over its perfect balance of flavors, the silky texture of the pasta, the rich complexity of the sauce, I felt the circle complete itself. The recipe that had sparked our journey of revelation had become the symbol of our transformation, of boundaries dissolved and connections strengthened. In the warm glow of family, both biological and chosen, surrounded by the legacy I'd built and the future it was evolving toward, I silently thanked Jeremy for his honest criticism months ago. That moment of teenage bluntness had shattered decades of careful compartmentalization, forcing me to reconcile the separated aspects of my identity and ultimately bringing me the integration I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. What had begun as an insult to my cooking had become the catalyst for the most authentic chapter of my life, one where I could finally be fully myself, Sophia Romano, grandmother and restaurant founder, keeper of traditions and nurturer of innovations, embracing both my past accomplishments and the promising future they had made possible. As I watched Jeremy explaining the fine points of proper lasagna construction to David and Melissa, his hands moving with the confident precision he'd inherited from me, I smiled at the beautiful irony of it all. Sometimes, life's most important lessons arrived in unexpected packages, even in the form of a teenage grandson calling your cooking disgusting. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.